Welcome to Roll Club is devoted to celebrating the dynamic jiu-jitsu community worldwide. Find out more at ROLLCLUB.CA. Today we are joined by Brandon Reed. Over the past few years, Brandon has become well known in the grappling community for bringing his extensive wrestling experience to the world of BJJ. The three-time NAIA national champion and ADCC veteran has set his sights on the competitive BJJ scene and has been racking up success in tournaments across North America, including most recently becoming the over 99 kilogram champ at the ADCC Toronto Open. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thank you.
So normally we talk about an athlete's jiu-jitsu journey, sort of their beginnings in discovering jiu-jitsu, and we'll get to that, but I think we'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about your wrestling background. So how did you come to wrestling?
I was 12 or 13, somewhere around then. I was trying to play football, and sadly, the football team that I was trying to play with was pretty good, and they didn't want me. But as I was leaving a tryout, one of the coaches was a wrestling coach, and he basically was like, "Hey, you should try this instead. Meet me at this location in 20 minutes," because he would always jump from football practice to coaching wrestling, and so I joined wrestling, and I never stopped after that.
That's awesome. What position were you going for in football?
I don't even know. I never even got to try. So the school was Iroquois High School. It was, I guess, a really good football team. I guess they were 12-0 or something the year before. And my mom was like, "You should try to do some sports because you're getting chubby." And so I was like, "Oh, whatever." And then I saw a flyer for the football team, and they're like, "Come out at this time to do tryouts." And literally, it was all one day. I went in, I sat down on basically a bench outside. No one talked to me for the whole time. The head football coach never talked to me. The practice ended. I just watched. I guess there may be seniors. There were other people my age just kind of sitting on a bench. It ended. I guess I don't know. He just looked at me and didn't want me. I don't know. It was weird. The practice ended, and that's literally as I was leaving. The I guess defensive coordinator Gary Cole. He was like, "Hey, Brandon, do you want to try this?" And so it was really weird. I never even talked to the head football coach. I only talked to the defensive coordinator, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What an incredible fork in the road moment, right? You could have gone on
Yeah.
when leaving, and now you've made this career. So let's quickly, so you've wrestled for, over a decade. You come to jiu-jitsu. What made you fall in love with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or are you still falling in love with it, let's say?
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed competing. I finished my college wrestling career in March of 21, and then basically at the beginning of April I started trying BJJ. There was a little local club in my college town. I didn't stay there very long, but it's where I started, and it was gi only essentially. So for the first couple months I only did gi, and then I was like, "Oh, whatever, I'm gonna try to compete eventually." And then a few months go by, I moved back to my hometown of Louisville, started training with Chewy, and then he's like, "Oh, you should sign up for a competition." And again, I didn't know what it was. I was, you know how it is. In your first year, you don't really know what it is. And I'm trying it, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna sign up for this competition." And then I get heel hooked in 15 seconds against this 150-pound guy. And I was like, "It sucks, but I love it. It's fun." So I think it was competing hooked me. I was like, oh, because I thought I was done competing. After wrestling, I was like, "All right, I'm done competing, whatever." But then when I tried the first competition, I didn't. It wasn't deep, I didn't have aspirations or goals. I was just like, I'm just gonna try this fun little hobbyist thing. But then after that, I got kind of hooked, and then kind of just kept competing after that.
I think everybody has that kind of ego death moment, especially if they're,
Yeah.
I'm relatively big myself. And the minute you get beat by that guy that's, several kilos to below, you're kind of,
Yeah.
well, I think it was Josh Barnett that said that, there's a whole legion of wrestlers who will finish their amateur career and kind of have nowhere to go, if the Olympics are done, or if they never made it to that level, what to do next. So he's a big proponent, obviously, of catch wrestling. But I think that transition to jiu-jitsu, as opposed to maybe MMA or another avenue, is one that seems so natural for wrestlers. And to that end, what were some challenges you faced in that transition from switching, and I guess are still dealing with in your competitive career now, but from going from competitive wrestling to competitive BJJ?
I mean, I think the biggest thing wasn't ever technical. I think it was detaching from my identity as a wrestler. So me and Chewy just had a really good talk about this. I was back in Louisville for a couple of days, and now I just got promoted to brown belt, and I think I'm pretty good at jiu-jitsu everywhere. I can play bottom, I can play top, I can get out of leg locks, I can do all these things. But when I first started, it was detaching from who I used to be. And then, like you said, ego death, it was like understanding that it's like, okay, like I'm not that good at this thing. So everyone, whenever I compete, they're like, oh, it's that wrestler guy. And I'm like, to me, that's not me anymore. Like, I'm not a wrestler. And it took a long time. I wouldn't say a long time. It took a couple of years of doing jujitsu to be like, I'm not just a wrestler. Like, that's something I did, but it's not who I am, you know? So, I think that was the biggest challenge. As far as the technical stuff goes, again, it's all hard. It's still hard. There's not like one obvious thing. I think it's the similar challenges that most people who are new to jiu-jitsu face, you know, leg locks, back defense, etc. But definitely progressed a lot in those areas. Still have a lot of progress to be made. But I think biggest thing was detaching from my old identity.
Totally. That idea of grappling being a spectrum with multiple rule sets as opposed to necessarily, motivations or whatnot. Yeah, it's very interesting to try to separate even just your game plan, right? So, I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to show that I'm the best double leg in the business.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's super fascinating. So I've had the great honor actually of attending one of your seminars down in Hamilton there, and I can confidently say you're an excellent instructor and conveyor of your knowledge and expertise. Is this something you focused on, this idea of being able to communicate your skill set and instruction?
Yeah, I started I've been teaching for it's 25 for 4 years. So my first job outside of college, like once I moved back to Louisville, I was like working at a coffee shop, and then on the side to make money, I was teaching like 14 private lessons a week to
Oh, wow.
to kids. So for like a year, I was working at this coffee shop, and then about 3 months after, I kind of quit the coffee shop job because the private lessons started to like kind of I don't know, scale. And so I taught like hundreds of private lessons. I even did a small little wrestling club. This was all for actual wrestlers, like folk
Mhm.
style wrestlers, not jujitsu people. And I thought, okay, this is what I was gonna do. So I got really lucky that like immediately after I finished college, I just kind of had the opportunity to make a little bit of money on the side teaching. And then once I started getting more and more into jujitsu, I stopped teaching wrestlers. Like I stopped teaching folk style wrestlers, and I went into exclusively doing private lessons with older people. And then eventually that led into like doing seminars in the States. And now I don't even know how many times I've taught, you know? So I guess it's just been practice. And then I started to develop a system. Like before, when I would teach what we call clinics in wrestling, but seminars in jujitsu, it's the same thing with a different name, right? It was kind of random. I'd be like, I have like double leg here, arm drag here, single leg. Whereas now it's like I have a system. It's anyone who goes to my seminars knows I always start with hand fighting, how to make attachments, what are the key concepts of hand fighting, etc. And then I'll start to switch into one system, like what I consider a system, like one move. Like okay, I'll do duck unders or I'll do slide bys. But I think over the time I had a lot of bad seminars, I had a lot of bad clinics, and I've had a lot of bad private lessons. So I was forced to kind of develop a some level of structure. I don't know if it's right or I don't know if it's wrong. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how people learn, but I do my best. But yeah, definitely lots of experience.
I was a teaching assistant for a little bit at a university, and I thought I got this. My first class, no problem. I
Yeah.
don't even need to read whatever. And then immediately after that, I systematized the approach. It
Yeah.
went so poorly that first day. I was like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nothing
Yeah.
will teach you better than teaching kids, right? That younger group, especially fine 12 to maybe 14 can be
Mhm.
either amazing or super difficult, but they'll get you ready for anybody after them is no problem.
100%.
So, what do you think makes a great coach or instructor? I thought you had a really interesting in your brown belt video that you released a couple of days ago about the instructor versus coach dynamic. Is there
Mhm.
any single coach that you would single out that had an influence on your coaching itself, as opposed to maybe your jujitsu game, but maybe how you present your jujitsu game or how you teach others?
Yeah, it's like in short for people to know, it's like I always say like an instructor teaches technique. A coach can also teach technique, but they're the person that's there for you for the deeper things like game planning, mindset, accountability. They're the person that's there for you like after you've lost a big match and they're crying in your corner, or you're crying and they're in your corner. Like your coach is usually also an instructor, but there's someone who's just a little bit deeper. Like there's like a real relationship. Whereas like I find myself, it always sounds harsh when I say this, but a lot of people would be like, "Oh, thanks, coach." I'd be like, "No, no, I'm just your instructor. Like, you can just call me Brandon. Like, thanks for," because it's like I find the word coach to be such an intimate word, versus instructor is very sometimes like it's not a bad thing because we live in North America, we're a capitalist society. It tends to be more capitalistic, especially with jujitsu. You know, we sell instructionals, we sell seminars, we sell our ideas of what we think is technique. And I think that's good. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's very important. But yeah, a coach that I had, my best coach ever was obviously my college wrestling coach. That guy was, he helped me through hard times in school. He helped me through bad breakups. He helped me through being just a turd with classes. He helped me when I was injured in wrestling. You know, he was there when I won, lost, etc. I haven't really had that relationship with anyone in jiu-jitsu in particular. Obviously, Chewy has been a more of a business mentor for me than anything. My actual time doing jujitsu with Chewy has been very sporadic because I'm always traveling, I'm always training here and there. But yeah, Chewy's more of like that a business coach, a guide. He's where I want to be as far as being in the business world with jujitsu and other things. And he's also a great instructor of jujitsu, don't get me wrong. But besides Chewy, Keith is also great. You know, I'm still building that relationship with him. You know, I did my ADCC camp with Heath Pedigo at PSF in Mount Vernon, but I wouldn't say my relationship with him is anything like it is with Chewy.
And I think Chewy's actually a great lead into my next question, which is about social media. You know, he's amazing at that presentation. I think we've all seen his videos, whether or not we've met him. And it plays a huge role in modern grappling, right? Social media, whether it be through brand building or instructionals, like we've said. You know, I feel like I've learned from people I would never get a chance to through instructionals. But how have you found navigating that side of things? You know, there's obviously a lot of positives, but there can be some pretty big pitfalls too.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's an expert on social media. Yeah. I don't know. I guess that I met a guy named James Smith. He does jujitsu, but he's like this English like fitness guy. And he was the one who kind of got me into it. I took a visit to B Team in 21 when I first started doing jujitsu. And I was training with him. And then afterwards he was like, man, like, what do you want to do? And I told him about the private lesson stuff. And he's like, you need to scale that. You need to start posting on social media. And I was like, social media, like in the wrestling world, we think social media is so lame. It's like so many of my old teammates they make fun of me even now because in the wrestling world it's kind of like taboo to be like a social media like influencer person. But the reality of it is, and how James explained it to me is like, who cares if it's taboo? Like, you're not going to make money just doing jujitsu, or you're not going to make money just doing wrestling. And so navigating kind of like the views of others, just being a person who's putting themselves out there, it was really weird at first. And obviously it's gotten a lot easier over time. Of course, there's like the annoyances of trolls, and it's just kind of the nature of it, right? But it's also the reality that, man, I might have trolls on social media, but I'm also like, whenever I go somewhere in person, it's everyone's always kind, everyone's always nice. So it's like learning to detach from that. Because again, it's like the idea of myself should be more important than others' idea of me. But of course, it's like it's a consistent practice of patience, you know. But I love it. I think if you don't do the social media stuff, I was talking to the guy I had a match with in the finals at the ADCC Open, Sean Goldsby. He's really good. Nogi Euros champ. He's beaten ADCC vets. He's a really good guy, but no one knows him because he doesn't do social media. And I was like, dude, you should do more social media, like, because you're an amazing talent. But if you don't put yourself out there, then literally no one will care. And it sucks, but it's the truth. Like, being good at jujitsu is not enough.
No,
So
for sure.
yeah, a little bit of a rant there, but
No,
yeah,
I think it's great, and I do really appreciate that you're not afraid to stir things up a little bit, but also, you know, again, having attended your seminar and just, you know, seeing other videos of yourself, approach everyone with a great deal of respect as well. So it's kind of this great balance. It's interesting what you're saying about wrestling too. You know, there's something with those Olympic sports that they have a certain degree of purity. You know, I do judo as well, and you know, judo sort of has that same problem, a little bit better, but you know, it's very different than jujitsu, where you can get like, you almost look like a race car driver at the end with like
yeah,
sponsors on your knees and stuff. So I think it's
yeah,
jiu-jitsu is a little bit more rough and tumble with its embrace of the
yeah.
commerce and the fun side of things, maybe a little bit.
Hmm.
Let's move a little bit on to technique here, because I think we touched on it earlier too with your seminars. I think you're probably best known maybe in this world for your hand fighting and you know, wrestling based takedowns. But what would you consider, you know, the best part or maybe an underrated part of your game?
My takedown defense.
Mm.
It's I haven't been. I mean, I've done I think like 60 jujitsu matches. I haven't been taken down yet. And then when I wrestled, I didn't get taken down for like my last 2.5 years of wrestling. So I think, but I always attribute this to that my ability to be really good at hand fighting, which makes it you rarely see people actually get in on my legs. And then also my ability to like scrimmage or scramble whenever people actually do make connections to my legs. Because my wrestling coach would always say, like, a great wrestler is great because you might be able to get onto his legs, you might be able to get into a double leg or a single leg, but it's like you're rarely going to finish on a
Mm.
great wrestler unless you do everything perfect. And so an underrated part of my game is my ability to counter wrestle when people actually make leg attacks. I just haven't ran into too many people yet in jiu-jitsu where they're actually getting in on my legs. I'm sure eventually as I get with better and better people, they're gonna get in on my legs. It's the reality of things. I'm not perfect, but I think I'm excited to keep getting bigger and bigger matches to hopefully be able to show that. Although I'd still say even most of the better guys aren't going to be able to touch my legs, but it's just the reality, you know?
And I think the two are related too, because you dictate so much of the match with your hands, right? So you're telling
Yeah.
them where you want to go, right? Whether you're playing high
Mhm.
or playing low or moving them all around.
Exactly.
It's a super fascinating way to watch and inspiring, honestly, from my perspective, grappling of how much you control their mind with your hand fighting, let's say, of where
Yeah.
they can go next. It's a great segue into I think one of your instructionals coming up, right? The hips don't lie.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I've come out with so many instructionals the past 4 years, but I haven't done a takedown defense one. And someone was like, "You should come out with like a beginner's course for takedown defense." The worst part about takedown defense is it's so conceptual more than with offense. It's very easy to break down techniques with offense, right? Because you're like, okay, I can try this and this. With takedown defense, it took me so long because when I drop my instructionals, I don't want them to be horrible. So I'm like, all right, how do I make a beginner's course that actually gives you something worth of value? Because I could always like fall into the pitfall of filming 4 hours worth of stuff, like of what ifs. But my focus was, all right, I want to do like the meat and potatoes of what is actually important for takedown defense when it comes to wrestling, which is head, hands, and hips defense, which is why hips don't lie became the name of it. But I was like, how do I actually make that valid? Because again, there's a million different takedowns. So how do you make a takedown instructional for a million different takedowns? I kind of just for this one just focused on like the basics of takedowns: high crotches, double legs, single legs, low singles, front headlocks. That's what you're normally gonna see, you know. So I had to decide that so it's not too long. I was like, I had to decide what are the things that I want to focus on, those 5 takedowns, and just a few basic defensive options that are techniques, and then concepts that are gonna work pretty much no matter what takedown your opponent is using. Specifically, the ideas of like using your hips, finding angles, laces to the mat, stuff like that. That I think will work pretty much across the board, but it was very difficult. I wanted to do a defense instructional for so long, but I needed to be patient. And finally, I figured out how to make it work well, for at least for me.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that whole, the tree gets larger and larger once you start thinking
Yeah.
about it, right? So you have to come back to the roots itself. And when will that be released?
I'm not sure. So I'm about to do a Canadian tour, like another seminar tour in Canada, and then I'm about to do another tour in Europe. So I'm
Mm.
like, it's kind of hard because most people drop their stuff on BJJ Fanatics, right? And I do
Yeah.
all of this stuff on my own. So like
Hmm.
I'm editing everything, I'm creating the opt-in pages. So it takes so long till my hope would be to drop it right after the Canadian tour, but then it's like I don't know. I might that's my hope, or either before or in the middle of it, but sometime soon, the next 5 to 6 weeks, I hope.
Awesome. Stay tuned, folks. That's what we're going to say for that one. So
Yeah, yeah,
the last little bit of our interview here is just a couple of rapid fire questions. You can go in as much detail or just one line them as you like. So
yeah.
this one's going to be, I think, a really difficult one, and I can't guess what you're going to say, but gi or no gi.
No gi for sure. I abandoned the gi. Yeah, yeah.
And then points or
Submission only. I'm so tired of the point that I compete in the points thing because that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's where the accolades matter. But I hate it so much. The amount of stalling is insane. And so for me, I know again, people identify me as a wrestler. I would rather someone pull guard and try to
yeah,
submit me than to just run away the whole time and try not to get scored on. So sub only for sure.
100%. Favorite cheat meal after a tournament?
Let's say like Cajun seafood. Yeah, I love it. It's very specific, but I love it.
That's perfect. Yeah. And one submission you can't live without.
Rear naked choke. It's the best. Yeah.
And then last one here. What's your go-to track in the bullpen when you're warming up?
No music. I can't do it.
Interesting.
I meditate. So like
Yeah.
whenever I do like lots of breath work, like Wim Hof
Mm,
stuff. So I used to listen to music when I was a kid, but now like I might listen to a little bit of music in the morning, like when I'm eating breakfast or something. But like when I get there, it's like I just try to be present and try to be
mm,
grateful and just try to breathe and try
mm,
to take it in, because I know that like that I need to. I always tell like people, it's like I don't listen to music because I want to be in that moment. Like I have
mm.
to before I compete. It's always weird. Like someone said it to me the other day. It's like they'll see me like do this and like and I'm like, can I feel? Can I hear? Can I smell? Okay, I'm here. Like,
Grounding yourself, right? Do you visualize
yeah,
at all? Do you do like a mind journey thing?
I mostly just breathe, try to feel, like breathe, try to feel, and then I'll just repeat my mantra over and over,
Mm.
and then I'll just go compete.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Well, thanks so much, Brandon. And just lastly, where can folks find you? Future socials and other places that they can get a hold of you.
Sure, it's Brandon Reed 3X on Instagram, and then on YouTube, I believe it's Brandon Reed Wrestling for Jiu-Jitsu.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. This has been another Roll Club. I don't know what we're calling it just yet. We'll call it the Roll Club Show for right now. But thanks,
Yep,
Brandon, and see you on the mat soon.
yep.
Awesome. So that's the end of the